Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 2 of my August wrap-up. I will link part 1 down below, and I mentioned in that video that I had a couple of books that I would not be talking about because they're for a secret TBR, and actually they would have gone in this part. So I still have a lot of books to talk about though, and the first one is Me the Waltz by Zelda Fitzgerald. This was our Past It Classics pick for the month of August. I think that live show should already be up by this point. Julia is the one who hosted that, so I will link that down below, and this was an experience. I don't even really know how to describe the premise of this because like the plot was non-existent or all over the place, however you choose to look at it. The book is apparently semi-autobiographical. We're following a woman and her tumultuous relationship with her husband, although honestly like that part seemed less messy than some of the other parts of the book, so that was interesting. And yeah, like we start with like her early life and then some of her romantic entanglements and then like their marriage. They have a daughter, then like other things happen. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to summarize this. This book was all over the place and it made no sense, and I'm sad to say that I hated this. I still feel so bad for Zelda Fitzgerald. I still hate F. Scott Fitzgerald. I still don't like The Great Gatsby, but sadly I couldn't stand Zelda's novel. Yeah, like the writing, there were occasionally some really good or interesting or beautiful or funny lines, and there were a couple of sections of the book where like the plot actually was there. The characters were actually doing things that made sense. Like there's a section where the main woman decides she wants to become a professional ballet dancer, and so we're following her doing that, and that actually like that part of the book actually had a focus, and it was much more interesting. So there was that, but overall I just hated this novel. I hated the writing so much. It was just word salad basically. Like it was just the most meandering, over descriptive, like weird ass metaphors that made no sense. It was one of those things where if she had just like in a paragraph, if she had just kept like one of those metaphors or sentences or like weird descriptions and then the rest was more intelligible, it could have been a really great bit of writing, but it just wasn't. Like here's just an example. The necessity for saying anything was dispelled by a weird and self-explanatory car manual about the table. It was not exactly a dance. It was an interpretive protest against the vertebrate state, punctuated by glorious ecstatic peons of rhythmic backslappings and loud invitations to the knights to join the party. Like, what? I hated it. Like the whole book almost was written like that. The only part where there was some relief was like the dialogue and occasionally some descriptions that were not like that, but the vast majority of this book was written like that and I could not stand it. The characters were so flat that they were nonsensical. Like none of their choices made sense because these didn't feel like actual characters. Like I really didn't like it. There were a couple of places where like the husband, I don't even remember his name, David, I think, and their daughter, like some of their scenes together were actually very sweet. And it was interesting because apparently one of the reasons that F. Scott Fitzgerald was furious that Zelda wrote this novel is that it was semi-autobiographical and he was afraid that people, like that it would make him look bad. And it's like, David was way nicer than F. Scott Fitzgerald was, so I don't know, I think this could only have helped his reputation, honestly. Oh, something I forgot to mention, which you probably could have gathered, is that this also, like I have no idea what the intention was behind this book. Like there was no point to it. Like especially there were one of the parts that we actually felt like we were building towards something just like fizzles out, and like I understand that not all books have to be satisfying in the same way, but I truly don't know what we are supposed to get from this book at all. I think appropriately for a book that made no sense, my review is kind of making no sense, so I'm just gonna leave this here. I gave Me the Waltz 1.75 stars. I hated it. Next, I finished The Trouble with Kings by Sherwood Smith. This is a standalone fantasy. I don't think it's in Sherwood Smith's like really large connected world. I don't think it's part of that. And our main character is a princess named Fleon, and she is tired of getting kidnapped, basically. She's very wealthy and like politically she's kind of an asset, like she would be if she married these different people. So she keeps getting kidnapped by people who want to use that for their own gain, and she's tired of it. She's like, enough is enough. And the book is about like her, well she does escape from that, and oh, it says it is set in the same world. Never mind, don't listen to me. In this romantic fantasy set in the same world as Crown Duel and Sasharia en Garde, Fleon is an ordinary princess who would rather be left with her music, but gets abducted not once, not twice, 3 times. What is a civilized princess to do? So that's kind of the setup for the book, and it kind of makes it sound like really light and fun and kind of madcap, and some of it is, but I also think there were some like deeper things going on here which I really enjoyed. And actually at the very beginning of this book, Fleon wakes up with no memory of like who she is or what's going on, and so it was really like we were kind of getting to know Fleon as she gets to know herself a little bit, which I think was done really well. At first I was not sure how I was going to get on with her, because obviously we don't know a lot about her character because she doesn't remember, but I ended up really liking her. I just really love her strength and her determination, and she feels very like ordinary and not special, but of course like we can see that some of the things that she cares about or is good at do make her special. So we kind of see her throughout the book starting to take a more active part in her own life. I also thought the politics of this book was really interesting, but I also think even if you don't like political fantasy, you might like this book anyway, because one of the things I really like about it is that it focuses on how these political things would affect the lives of ordinary people, which I really liked. I also liked the writing a lot. I really enjoyed the court scenes. Those are just really fun. I kind of wish we had spent more time there, but there was like other plot stuff that had to happen, so I understand. But those were just really fun. I also really liked the music aspect and how important that was to Fleon and the role that played in the story. It was really interesting, and I really loved Fleon's friendship with Jewel. I just enjoyed that so much. That was one of my favorite parts in the book. They really balance each other very well. Jewel is this very like romantic and maybe a little impulsive and just very like kind of fiery person, and Fleon is much more reserved, but they just balance each other so well, and I love their friendship. And then one of my other favorite parts was actually the romance in this book. I thought that was really good and really well done. I really liked it. And then probably related to that, my 2 biggest issues with this book were actually related to my favorite parts. So the romance, like I said, I really liked it, but Sherwood Smith does this thing where like you're building up to this relationship and you think something's gonna happen, and then she just like completely dissipates all that like tension with a dumb misunderstanding. That was very frustrating. It felt like the rest of the book kind of dragged because I was like waiting for these 2 people to like stop being dumb and talk to each other. So that was very frustrating, but like overall I did love the romance. And I also, like I said, Jewel was my other favorite part of this book. I hated the way other people kind of viewed her. Like most of the other characters in this book think of her as like kind of superficial or like airheaded. Is that even a word? An airhead? And I just really didn't like that because I really loved Jewel, and it really bothered me that one of the things people look down on her for is like that she wants to like go to court and wear beautiful dresses and fall in love and like all of this. And it's like, not only is that just a fine thing for her to want anyway, but considering the like incredibly stressful political situation she came from, it's like, let her have her dresses. I think she has earned this. So that also bugged me. Like Fleon did not treat Jewel that way, but a lot of the other characters did, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the way the book almost seemed to view her as like, well, she's kind of ridiculous, but we love her. It's like, I don't think she's that ridiculous. But anyway, I did really enjoy this overall. I think this book is like really solidifying Sherwood Smith as a really dependable author for me, and I gave The Trouble with Kings 4 stars. Next, I finished A Goose Girl by K.M. Shea. This was a present from my lovely friend Hannah from Lynn Hermione, and I really enjoyed this. This is the first book in the Entwined Tales series, which is a series of like barely connected, not even really connected, fantasy novellas by a bunch of different authors. The only connection they all have is that we're following different siblings in the same family, I think, and they're all retellings of a different fairy tale. And this is a retelling of the Goose Girl. Our main character is actually the maid of the original story, which is such a cool concept. I'm surprised I haven't heard of other retellings that do that, because I think that's such an interesting way to approach this story. And like I said, I really like this. So our main character's name is Rin, and because of the things that happen in the story, she ends up in a kingdom with people thinking that she's the princess. And she doesn't want to be there, she doesn't want to do this, but she's also afraid what will happen if she gets found out, so she's like having to be very careful while also trying to get people to guess what happened to her so they can help her, but also like not letting herself get in trouble with the royal family, that kind of thing. So she's in a very tough position. So we follow her kind of adjusting to this royal life as best she can, trying to get people to help her when, because of this magical spell, she's not actually allowed to communicate to people what's wrong with her. We see her like get to know some of the members of the royal family. We see her start to make friends and spend time with people. I really liked Rin as a character. I really enjoyed the writing. I'm really impressed with how K.M. Shea could fit all of the plot beats of A Goose Girl into this really short story. Like, it didn't feel rushed at all. I was really impressed with that. I also liked the other characters. As I said, I just like the premise of this novella. I think that was really cool, and I really like some of the changes that K.M. Shea made to the original fairy tale. Like, I've read a few retellings of the Goose Girl at this point, and like the character of Falada, he's a magical talking horse. He's always like very kind and noble and like all of this, and in this version he's kind of a brat, and I kind of loved it. Like, don't get me wrong, I really like the character of Falada in the other versions as well, but it was really fun to just see him be like kind of a jerk. I don't know, that was a fun twist, I think. So yeah, I really liked this. Really the only thing is I would have liked there to be like a little more development with the romance, but this is so short that it didn't bother me, and I did still like them together. I was actually like, considering how short the novella was, I was like really impressed with how invested I was in this romance. So I really liked that. There was also like a weird kind of magic thing near the end that I think was unnecessary, but I had a great time with this, and I gave a Goose Girl 4 stars. Next, I finished All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. This is the first book in a fantasy duology, I think, and our main character is named Amora. Yes, and she is the princess of this kingdom where the royal family is the only one who can wield this soul magic. All of the islands, if you live on the island, you have a different kind of magic, and the only ones who can use the soul magic is the royal family, and the reason they have to use it a certain way is to protect everybody else from using it, because in this world, if you use more than one magic, it ends up like corrupting you, and you eventually die of it. So that's why the magic is structured the way it is, and Amora has to prove herself to the people of her country that she is ready to like ascend to the throne at some point, and that she can control this soul magic. And at her demonstration, things go very disastrously wrong. They don't happen the way she expects them to, and so she ends up striking a deal with this man named Bastian, who is a pirate, and he has his reasons for wanting to help her and wanting to like help save these kingdoms and everything. So they go off together. They end up with a couple of other characters on board as well, and they're on this journey to try and kind of like figure out what's going on with this rebellion, because it's putting all of the islands at risk. And so Amora thinks if they can save the kingdom from this, then she can prove to her people that she is ready to lead them and to use this soul magic. This is a great example of why I don't DNF books very often. I know other people DNF a lot more than I do, and I think that's fine, but like, I'm really glad that I don't do it super often, because I was not super into this at the beginning. It was one of those books where like it was fine, but there were some things that were bugging me about the writing, and I just like wasn't super into it. I could tell it was like a solid book, but it just maybe wasn't for me. And then I don't know if it was like my mood at the time or what, or like I think some of it at least is like things actually did improve as the book got on. Okay, I'm so sorry if the angle is different. I had to change my camera battery. But as I was saying, I think at least part of it was related to the book itself, because I do feel like as the book went on, the issues I had with the writing just like stopped happening, which was great. And I also just got like so invested in this. I ended up really, really liking this book. I really liked our kind of like our main group of main characters. Amora is the only like perspective character, but we have like 3 other characters that are kind of with her as well. I really liked Amora and how she's willing to make difficult choices in this book. Like, she doesn't always feel like she knows what's the best thing to do, but she's willing to like make those hard decisions. She knows she has to, and I like the way that was explored. I also really liked Bastian. It's funny because I'm not usually a big fan of pirate stories or like pirate plot lines. I think maybe one of the reasons I liked him is because he wasn't a super piratey pirate, but I really liked him, and I like that there was like the way that we see there's more to him than meets the eye. I like the way that was done specifically. Like the backstory for him, I thought was really interesting. I really liked his and Amora's dynamic and their like banter. I also liked, I think his name was Ferric, who is Amora's like intended husband. Like, they're like engaged, and she has no interest in him. I just thought Ferric was also an interesting character. Like, he's in a really tough position, and even though I definitely understand where Amora is coming from, I also see why Ferric feels the way that he does. Like, he's kind of trying to make the best of a bad situation. And there's also a 4th character who I don't want to spoil, but I really, really liked her, and I really liked the female friendship between her and Amora. So I liked her characters in general. I thought the world was interesting, and the story and the setting. I liked the little bit of like mermaid lore we got here. That was one of the things that I was looking forward to about this book, because I tend to like mermaid stories, and I think this one was really well done. It's not like a huge element of the plot, but it is there. I also want to mention there was a scene that I really loved where it was like a great example of like consent between 2 people, and something I specifically love about it is that the female character, it was between a male and a female character, and the woman realized that the male character was drunk, and she was like, no, like, we can't do it. And I just really like that, because I think there is still kind of this, like, we don't necessarily think of drunk guys as not being able to give consent. Like, I think that's a stereotype that is still kind of persistent, and so I really like the way that was dealt with here. And yeah, I did really enjoy this. For my personal taste, there was more gore than I would have liked. I think it wasn't gratuitous because it made sense for the kind of magic that Amora does, but I just found that unpleasant to read, and I wouldn't even call that like a failing of the book necessarily. Like, I don't think of it as something I took points off for. I just wanted to mention it, and it is something I didn't like. Primarily the things I like took points off for is just like it dragged in places, but I did really like this, and I gave All the Stars and Teeth 4 stars. Next, I finished the 2 books for the Read the Renaissance book club. This third quarter is on Joan of Arc, and the first one I finished is a nonfiction book that is Joan of Arc by Herself and Her Witnesses by Regine Pernoud, and I think, let me see, the translated from the French by Edward Hyams. I really appreciated this. It's weird to say I enjoyed it because obviously it's hard to read in parts, but I thought this was so excellent, and I'm so glad that I have read this. It is a very powerful experience to read Joan's own words. Obviously they're translated, but to see what she actually said to people, to get some idea of who she was as a person, was just a really wonderful experience. So the way this is structured is like chronologically through Joan's life, and we will have a lot of like first-hand accounts of what her character witnesses said about her, and we also see like the transcripts, like I think almost the entire transcript of Joan's trial of condemnation, which is the trial before she was executed, and then we also see some bits from the trial of rehabilitation, which is a few years after that, when Joan had already been put to death, when like the French government and church officially absolved her. So we have a lot of excerpts from Joan's 2 trials, only one of which she was actually there for, and we also have a lot of excerpts from people who testified at her trials, or at the second trial specifically. And then interspersed with that, we have sections of commentary from the author where she, you know, gives context. She talks about like she kind of connects the things that she's talking about, and I think like the scholarship of this book was really well done. I think Regine Pernoud is very good at supporting the things she's saying with the text. I also think this was just very clearly written as a history, and I also am just so impressed that even though this is a scholarly book, I was just really impressed at how well Joan herself shone through in this book. Like her, you know, some of her personality and her strength and her cleverness. Like, I'm still surprised every time I come across like somebody who the author is quoting, who says that she wasn't especially smart, like outside of warfare, that she wasn't that clever, because so many of her answers to her interrogators are brilliant, and like even witnesses of the time were like so impressed, and they were like, you know, there are doctors of theology who couldn't have answered as well as she did. So it's just really cool to get to see some of her personality like that. I think specifically a couple things that this book shows really well is how this was like Joan's trial was rigged from the beginning, in every aspect. And then I think the book does a great job of showing how Joan's trial was not actually a religious thing. Like, that's how it was like presented, but it was about politics. Like, Joan died because of politics. So I thought this was great. I think there were a couple parts that maybe could have been summarized a little more, like some of the really long battle descriptions, but for every part like that, there were a lot more parts that I really enjoyed, or that I got a lot out of, or I thought were really well done, or that I was happy to read. And yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I think I'm actually gonna do a kind of review discussion on this book and the next book, even though it's very niche, because I have some like thoughts, and it was just very interesting because I had actually already started reading this next book, which was a reread, and that is Voices, The Final Hours of Joan of Arc by David Eliot. And then as I was reading this one, I was like, oh, maybe I should read the nonfiction before I finish this one, so then I can have like more context. So I put this down and I read the nonfiction, and then I went back to this book, and it was very interesting. So this is a novel in verse about Joan of Arc, and it's told through poems from herself and a lot of the other people that she knows, but also like objects around her, which is a really interesting concept. And I think the poetry was very good. I think this is a great example of a well done novel in verse. But as a portrait of Saint Joan of Arc, I have mixed feelings about it. Like, he kind of, I think, made Joan into a modern idea of what a strong and brave woman would have been. Obviously there's always going to be interpretation of historical figures. I'm not saying like you can't change anything because it's about a real person, but I think some of the things he changed were not great. I'm going to get more into this in that review, but like there were just some things where I don't love the way they were framed. I think as poetry it's good, but if you want to know more about who Joan was as a person, or like kind of the real things that she went through and that happened to her, and like basically if you like Joan and you want to know more about Joan, I would recommend the nonfiction book. Next, I finished The Merchant and the Rogue by Sarah M. Eden. This is the 3rd book in the Dreadpenny Society, I think is the name of the series. And I actually received this from the publisher in exchange for an honest review, and this book and the next book are two more that I'm going to do kind of a combination review for, so that'll be going up soon, hopefully maybe even before this video, we'll see. I really enjoyed this. I think this is my favorite in the series so far. Once again, we are following two main characters. One of them is an Irishman named Brogan Donnelly, and the other is a woman named Vera Sorokina, and she is a Russian immigrant, but she has grown up most of her life in London. And so Brogan ends up kind of going undercover for the Dread Penny Society, and he ends up working at Vera's father's like printing shop. And as with most of the books in the series, I think all three of them, they each have secrets that they're keeping from the other, which normally would bug me, but I think the way it's done in these books, I don't mind because it's realistic. And also when they do eventually find out, I don't feel like the fallout from that is like overly dramatic just to drag out the book more, if that makes sense. Like I feel like people respond reasonably to it. So yeah, our main characters are Brogan and Vera. I really liked both of them. I really liked their romance. I also really liked both of the Penny Dreadfuls we got here, because we always get those interspersed throughout the book. I liked the social issues, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave The Merchant and the Rogue 4 stars. I will talk about it more in that review video. And then the other one I'm going to talk about there is The Matchmaker's Lonely Heart by Nancy Campbell Allen, and this is not connected to that book. They're not in the same series, and this one is also a proper romance like that one is, and it is also historical. I think, let me see when this is set. I don't see the year for this. Oh, it says proper romance Victorian, so it's in the Victorian era, and we are following our two leads. One of them is a woman named Amelie, and she is really a romantic. She kind of writes like romantic advice letters for her aunt's magazine, and our male lead is an inspector named Michael, and Amelie ends up spying on this couple that she set up through the magazine just to see if things go well. But the man on the date, it turns out that he's under investigation, so Michael thinks that Amelie might have something to do with it, so that's how they kind of meet. They don't really hit it off very well, and Amelie is like horrified that he's like under suspicion. She's like, no, he's like a good man. She has kind of a crush on him, so she wants to prove his innocence. And so she and Michael end up like working together on this investigation. Well, Michael doesn't actually intend for her to help. Really, she's just supposed to get him into this like book club so he can like observe the guy. But of course, she ends up proving herself very useful, so they spend a lot more time together. And I really, really enjoyed this. I thought this was such a well done book. I really liked the two main characters. They have kind of like a grumpy sunshine vibe to their romance, which I really enjoyed. I also really liked the supporting characters. Amelie has two cousins that she's really close with. Overall, I really enjoyed this, and I gave it 4 stars. Again, I will talk about it more in that video. Next, I finished Clockwork Boys by T. Kingfisher. This is the first book in the Clock Noir War duology, although it really, from what I've heard from people, it really is more like one story that's split into 2. So it's good to know that going in. And this was a buddy read with my friend Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly. She has been enjoying T. Kingfisher, and obviously I love her books. I talk about her a lot, so I really enjoyed buddy reading this with her. So one of her main characters is a woman named Slate, and she has kind of been tasked with gathering together this ragtag group of a paladin, an assassin, she's the forger, and a scholar, to basically go off on this impossible mission that no one expects them to survive. But if they do, they get, I think, like, amnesty. So there is an incentive, but nobody expects them to get that far. But they're supposed to go to this city and figure out what is happening with these Clockwork Boys, which are these, like, mechanical, like, war machines, I think, that are, like, devastating just this area in general. There's, I think, a threat of war from like the city that they're going to, I think. And then our other main character is the paladin, a disgraced paladin named Caliban. Like, Slate actually recruits him from prison, and you find out what he did, and it is really bad. It is very intense, and he like can't forgive himself for it. And so really, like, this whole book is Slate like finding them, and then like most of the book is the journey to Aniket City, so you don't even get there until like the very end of the book. And you guys know I really don't tend to like journey books, but I really enjoyed this one. T. Kingfisher is just an author I love. I really love the way she writes. Her humor really, really works for me, and I just really love the way she writes characters as well. So even though the plot structure is not something I tend to like, I was just really enjoying these characters and this writing and humor, so it really worked for me. I just really loved Slate and Caliban as characters. Slate is like so practical and like normal, and like she's very good at things. Like Kelly was talking about during our buddy read, how one of the things she likes about T. Kingfisher, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is she writes characters that are like very competent but are also just very human and very believable. And like she writes about like awkward moments and like people who like they have like a conversation, they're like, oh, why did I say that? And it's like they're embarrassed, like just things that are very human experiences, even in these like fantastical worlds. And I really enjoy that. Like what I always say is her stories feel like she dropped real regular people into this like fantasy or like fairy tale world, and it's like that's how real people would react to these things. And then I also really liked Caliban. Like, I think he's such a complex and interesting character. I just think it was so interesting the way he was written, and the way that even though the terrible things that he did are maybe not his fault, like he still did them, and like the fact that he still feels guilt even though like it wasn't his fault these things happened. It's like, how would you not feel guilty though for doing them even if it wasn't your choice? I'm being very vague because of spoilers, but I just think that was explored so well. I also think the dynamic between Slate and Caliban is really interesting. And then really like my issue with this book was with the two other characters who are on the journey, Brenner and Learned Edmund. They just, compared to Slate and Caliban, they were much more predictable and very, like, they just felt much flatter. I did really like that by the end of the book we're starting to see more depth from them, so I'm thinking that will continue in the second book, but I just didn't really, like, they were just annoying characters, which everyone else acknowledges that they're annoying too, so I guess that makes sense. But even aside from that, they just felt annoying in very predictable ways, if that makes sense. Like, their archetypes I don't tend to enjoy, and they just felt more predictable, especially compared to how complex and interesting Slate and Caliban were. But I did really enjoy this. I gave Clockwork Boys 4 stars, and I'm excited to like finish off this duology slash one book split into 2. And finally, the last book I finished in August was The Hired Girl by Laura Amy Schlitz. Laura Amy Schlitz wrote Amber and Clay, which I absolutely loved, one of my favorite books of the year. So I was very excited to read another novel from her, and thankfully I also thought this one was fantastic. And this was also part of the giveaway that I won from Literary Gladiators. Again, I will link all the people I mentioned down below, and you'll be seeing quite a few more of the giveaway books I think in the coming month. So this is a novel told in diary entries, which is funny because I never think of those as something I like, but I've read some really excellent ones, so maybe I need to reevaluate my feelings on that. Our main character is named Joan, and she has a really hard life. I think this is set in early 1900s. Yeah, 1911 is when it starts, and her mother has died, and so she's stuck doing all of the housework for her father and her brothers, and like none of her family treats her well, and to make matters worse, she was really happy going to school, but now her father's making her stay home and like do all the chores and like housework, because he says like there's no point in her going to school, and Joan is understandably miserable. Nobody cares what happens to her. She's just forced to do all this work for people who are incredibly ungrateful, and emotionally abusive, and also sometimes threaten physical abuse. So she's really unhappy, and then one day she ends up leaving. She runs away to Baltimore. I think it's Baltimore. Yes. And she ends up getting a job as a hired girl, or like a housemaid kind of, with this high society family. And so the book is her diary. It's about her experiences. It's about what she wants from life, and this was just so wonderful. I loved Joan as a main character. I love the way that she views the world. Like, she loves art and books so much, and even though she hasn't had access to a lot of them, the way that she views them is just so beautiful to see, and I just really connected with the way she always thinks of like the real world can't possibly be that ordinary, you know? It's like she's waiting for real life to start, and what real life for her is like the exciting and wonderful and romantic and interesting things that happen in books, because she believes that there has to be something like that in real life, which I just thought was wonderful. I actually saved a quote, very surprising and exciting for me. "My books promised me that life wasn't just made up of workaday tasks and prosaic things. The world is bigger and more colorful and more important than that. Maybe not here at Steeple Farm, but somewhere. It has to be. It has to be." I just thought that was really beautiful, and I just really felt for Joan so much. She's also a dreamer. She's very intelligent, but she's not used to thinking of herself that way. And she also has like very believable insecurities. Like, she just felt so real. I also loved the writing of this book. Joan's voice is so clear and so engaging and warm. I just really enjoyed her, and I'm so happy that we know from the premise that she gets away from her horrible father and family, because that was like a rough part to read at the beginning. And it's just, I think this book shows so clearly that abuse does not have to be physical to be devastating. And there was the threat of physical abuse to Joan, but even though most of it was emotional abuse, just seeing the way her father treats her and talks to her and like tells her that she that she does not deserve anything, that she will never deserve anything better than this, that like this is all her life can be, and she should be grateful because she is unlovable and just like these horrible, horrible things. And to see Joan escape from that, and to see her realize that she is better than that, and that she is a person who deserves to have dreams and happiness, is just like so satisfying. Like I really hated her father. He was a very good antagonist, even though he was just at the beginning of the book, because I loathed him. I also really liked the way some topics were discussed in this book, like the importance of education, and the way that Joan's mother really, like, she saw that as the way out for Joan, and she made her promise before she died, like things related to that. And I also thought this book did a really great job of talking about respect for different religions. Joan is Catholic, and she hasn't been, I don't think she's had her first communion yet, so she's still kind of like learning. And she also, the high society family that she goes to work for is an upper class Jewish family, and Joan did not know any Jewish people before this, so she makes some mistakes. But they come from ignorance rather than cruelty. But Joan also has to realize that you can hurt people without meaning to, and that still counts. And I just think that was done really well. I think the discussions about different religions and having respect for them was just really well done. This book actually won the National Jewish Book Award for Young Adult Literature, and the Association of Jewish Libraries Sidney Taylor Book Award. So from that, I would assume that the Jewish representation was handled really well. I also think the whole cast of characters was just so well written. Like I said, I loved Joan, I hated her father, but there's also a lot of characters where they just feel so real, and that like sometimes you are furious at them and then sometimes you like them. Like there were definitely some that I had like pretty firm opinions on, but there were several characters where it's like I couldn't make up my mind about, or like they would surprise you, but in ways that felt believable because they're like the way that real people surprise you. So I really liked that as well, and I thought this was really wonderful. I gave The Hired Girl 5 stars. Okay everybody, so that was the rest of the books I read in August. I think that was a little more coherent than the first wrap up I filmed earlier today, but we will see. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!